Were you ever curious about a character in a manga? The kind who feels like they're hinting at something long before the story reveals it? In Bleach, a few characters give off that same feeling. Yet Renji, with his crimson hair and tattoos reflected even in his sword spirit, Zabimaru, sparks a particular kind of curiosity, doesn't he? As if his tattoos are already hinting at a motif tied to something far darker. Something we only caught a glimpse of when that uncharted world first opened its gate. And now it's beginning to unleash itself. And once you start looking through a Japanese cultural lens, those distinctive tattoos begin to feel less like an artistic choice and more like subtle foreshadowing. When you realize how Kubo weaves cultural references into his storytelling, planting them as seeds, you start to wonder what more those tattoos might reveal when seen through that very same lens. A lens that also appears in the way Kubo intertwined Nanao's family name, her inherited sword, and their sacred role with Japan's Shinto mythology. And in a universe defined by the bond between a Shinigami and their sword, Nanao's lack of one marked her as different from the start. She is known for her Kido abilities, and yet, for a lieutenant, wasn't that very lack what made you question why she couldn't manifest one? It's the first hint Kubo planted long before the 1,000-year Blood War arc revealed the answer. The revelation makes you realize how it's connected to that cultural lens that ties her family name Ise to the Ise Grand Shrine, guardian of Japan's sacred mirror, the Yata no Kagami. At the Ise Grand Shrine, priestesses historically guarded the Yata no Kagami, a name reflected in the Ise heirloom sword. The Shinken Hakkyōken, 8-mirror sword paralleling the Yata no Kagami, the 8-span mirror of Ise Shrine. And behind that heirloom sword lies a lineage that explains her inability to possess an individual sword. The Ise clan is a matrilineal line of priestesses who oversee rituals yet are burdened with a curse that results in the early death of every man who marries into their family. In each generation, the head of the clan inherits the Shinken Hakkyōken, an inspiration drawn from the history of the Ise Shrine, where the position of Supreme Priestess was historically held by an unmarried princess of the Imperial family, devoted entirely to the shrine's sacred ceremonies. And once you realize that Nanao is only a minor character, you start to wonder, what more could Kubo have in store for Renji, one of Ichigo's closest friends? Because if minor characters have been given bloodline reveals, then shouldn't a key character have one too? One rooted deeper in the lore itself? One that is tied to that family that's been withheld until now? Because once you look closely at the world they are overseeing, through a Japanese culture lens, those distinctive tattoos start to read almost like a cultural seed Kubo planted long ago. And once you understand the history of a culture where tattoos are interwoven into its society, seen as both art and stigma, carrying a persistent social stigma from their historical link to criminals. And this stigma has deep historical roots in the system known as the Irezumi-Kei, which was a punitive tattooing system, with each design revealing the nature of the crime as well as the specific mark for each region. Once a criminal was marked for life, they lived as outcasts, a mark that was itself their permanent exile and social exclusion. And doesn't that bring to mind the uncharted territory of hell? A world where criminal hollows are sent for punishment, and you see that reference in the aesthetics of hell itself. Tattooed chains that visually symbolize imprisonment reflect the severity of their sentence, a visual theme that originated in the design of the Hell Warden, first seen in the early chapters of the manga, fitting the distinct aesthetic of his world. So when Kubo gives Renji and his sword spirit, Zabimaru, the same visual motifs associated with hell, doesn't that seem deliberate? Those tattoos of his, they only began to appear after he entered the Shinigami Academy, spreading gradually over time. Yet it's the lightning bolt, a recurring motif shared by Harribel and her two Fracciones, that makes you wonder, could this same motif be part of a family crest that oversees the world where Shinigami and Hollows coexist? It's almost as if these visual cues are subtly hinting at a bloodline not yet revealed. And what else is that unexplored world hinting at? Because once you look closely at the world building, the subtle clues are the gate itself, the giant skeletal figures, and the color purple. If you think about it, the color choice feels deliberate, doesn't it? A visual cue. After all, purple is a symbolic color strictly reserved for the Imperial court, and was once forbidden to commoners, a parallel to Bleach's nobility that hints this world is overseen by the final noble Shinigami clan, whose ancestors sealed what was known as the Pit. And when you look at the visuals of the skeletons at the giant gate and the decaying flesh of Sailaporo's arm, it's as if they evoke the imagery of decay, doesn't it? And doesn't that remind you of the Kusōzu, a depiction of the 9 stages of decomposition, a Buddhist portrayal of decay and impermanence? The skeletons symbolize the final stages of bones, right before they are nothing but dust. But now that the balance has collapsed, the stages of the Kusōzu seem to be reversing, with the reformation of the eyeball serving as a visual cue to hell's unleashing. So where else in the manga have we seen that exact skeletal motif? Have you thought about Renji's sword? His shikai contains a vertebra-like spine, and his bankai is formed from a giant arm, made up of bone segments and a spine, as if it depicts part of the new caught in its final stages of bone, creating a unified bone motif. And doesn't that remind you of the giant skeletons at the gate of hell? By giving Renji a bone-themed sword, it seems like a subtle hint from Kubo linking him to hell. So could a member of that hidden bloodline have been right in front of us all along? The answer remains hidden, known only to those behind that giant gate, or maybe somewhere closer, tied to Soul Society itself. Yet when you think about it, doesn't that feel like an intertwining of cultural references? The kind of foreshadowing that only makes sense once you understand the world Kubo is drawing from? In that sense, could Renji be that member, somehow secretly descending from the final noble family linked to hell? It shifts our entire perspective of him and makes us wonder, was Abarai never his true family name? Almost like another of Kubo's deliberate misdirection. So could the howls from the Jaw of Hell arc be Renji's turn? The only one in Ichigo's inner circle whose origin remains unclear. Former human or true blood Shinigami? Thank you for watching. Do you think stories ever truly end? Or do they always leave us searching? One story at a time, one sip at a time, until next time.